Welcome to Your Money Guides, brought to you by Interface Financial Planning. Hello. In this guide, I'm going to be talking about equity release. Equity release has become a potential solution to the financial challenges faced by hundreds of thousands of individuals and couples in today's UK society and economy. This arises from a combination of people living longer, wealth tied up in property, stress on public services, especially in this case, the provision and cost of care, retirement periods lasting for many decades, higher cost of living in retirement, and generational imbalances. I shall explore all of these factors further in this guide and show how they interact with equity release solutions. If you consider your property solely from a financial viewpoint, it's an asset. In many cases, a substantial asset, often representing a large part of an individual's or couple's wealth. If it's not subject to a loan, most typically a mortgage, then it's a free asset, free of any restriction. As an asset, it can play a pivotal role in later life financial planning, supporting retirement income, providing valuable cash lump sums at important times, and helping to pay for care fees. To release capital or income from your property, there are only two ways to achieve that: either sell the property or borrow against its value. Equity release covers both these possibilities. There are other ways, but equity release may have advantages over the alternatives. There is one aspect to using property as an asset to support capital and income needs, which is very different to any other asset you may have. You cannot live in other types of asset. If you have an investment portfolio, for example, this could be used to help with income requirements or to release capital, but you don't live in your investment portfolio. The dual nature of a property, acting as both somewhere to live and potentially a valuable financial asset, creates a very different dynamic. Equity release often allows people to stay in their own homes whilst utilising the value in their own lifetimes. Equity release can also be used to release funds from second homes or buy-to-let investment properties, increasing its range of use for many. All of which makes it very interesting that despite the value of equity release in so many instances and for so many people, it can still be perceived as an option of last resort. This probably stems from historic problems in the equity release market, from a time when it was not properly licensed and regulated, during periods when interest rates were very high. The factors that led to these problems have now been eradicated. Other perceived negative aspects of equity release solutions are that they are inflexible, costly, and risk people at their most vulnerable stage of life being ejected from their homes. None of this is correct. Schemes are generally flexible, they offer lower costs than ever before, and safeguards exist to ensure homes are not repossessed. Properly understood, equity release is an excellent financial solution in many instances. Not all, by any means, but many. In this respect, what is crucial is that individuals and couples planning their financial futures should not rule it out before it's properly explored and discussed with a suitably qualified expert. The key is to explore the option where relevant, and I hope this guide is helpful as part of your exploration into equity release. So let's start with looking at the equity release market. It's probably fair to state that the financial services companies are sometimes poor at making things easy to understand. Or put another way, the sector tends to make simple things confusing. This is the case when it comes to equity release, as the very name and titles applied within the sector can be confusing. The reality is, equity release is a description of a broad range of options. An equity release scheme as such doesn't really exist. Equity release covers two separate methods of releasing equity from a property. The way to think of equity release is a blanket term, which describes the action for people of retirement age to stay in their homes whilst releasing funds from the value of their homes. It also includes releasing funds from other property you may own beyond your main residence. The two specific types of schemes are lifetime mortgages and home reversion plans, and I will cover these in more detail in a moment. The key aspect of equity release is to allow for the release of funds from a property subject to certain safeguards. So what does this mean? The main safeguard includes a cap on the amount that can be taken out as a loan, or in the case of a partial sale, the amount that can be sold, plus a guarantee that the home cannot be repossessed or sold from under you. In addition, today's market is one where the cost of releasing equity in terms of interest rates are much lower than they used to be, plus those interest rates are typically ones that are fixed. Equity release is now subject to much tighter regulation than ever before, and the Equity Release Council provides a high level of protection to individuals. Today's market is almost entirely unrecognisable compared to the market of a decade or two ago. It is a market which now works extremely well. The equity release lending market is growing rapidly, and within the next few years it's predicted to reach $5 billion per year in new loans. In 2017, analysis from the Equity Release Council estimated that total homeowner equity in England has reached an unprecedented £2.6 trillion, with £1.8 trillion belonging to over 55 aged households. Equity describes the amount that is the free asset. So what are the different types of schemes available? There are two types of equity release schemes available: lifetime mortgages and home reversion plans. A lifetime mortgage is a mortgage secured against your property. You still own the property and can benefit from any future price increases. A home reversion plan is the sale of part or all of your property to a home reversion plan provider. They buy this in exchange for a cash lump sum. While all or part of your property will belong to the plan provider, you can remain living in the property for the rest of your life, and you do so rent-free. If your property increases in value, you will only benefit from the increase in the value of any proportion you still own. To think of the difference between the two options, consider the lifetime mortgage option as a loan and the home reversion plan as a sale. There are variations on lifetime mortgages available for you to consider. These include lump sum lifetime mortgages, interest service lifetime mortgages, and drawdown lifetime mortgages. The lump sum option is, as its name implies, where you arrange to borrow a set amount and receive a lump sum in return immediately. The interest rolls up year on year. You do not pay any interest. The interest service lifetime mortgage is the same, but in this instance, you have the option to make all or partial interest payments, which results in slowing the rate of the roll-up of accrued interest and keeps the mortgage from escalating too quickly in size. The drawdown lifetime mortgage is where you agree a facility, but instead of taking all the amount immediately, you take the amount in stages as you require the funds. You will only be charged interest once you have made a drawdown. This could help limit the interest costs over time. So how about home reversion plans? A home reversion plan is where you sell all or part of your home in return for a tax-free cash lump sum or a regular income and a lifetime lease. This lease allows you to legally remain in your home until you die or go into long-term care. When you die or move into long-term care, your home is sold. The home reversion plan provider then receives the full value of their share of the sale price. You or your estate receive the remainder. For example, if you sold 40% of your property to the home reversion plan provider, on the sale of your property they would receive 40% of the sale proceeds, and you or your estate would receive 60%. A point to bear in mind here is that the sale of 40% of your home value does not mean you would receive a full 40% cash value. The amount actually received is always lower than the value percentage sold in a home reversion scheme. So how do the two options compare and contrast? The two options present you with a contrasting position should you choose either one over the other. One involves entering into a loan against your property, the other involves selling part or all of your property, the consequences of which can produce different outcomes in the long term. It's very difficult to make a direct financial comparison between the two types of equity release. This is because of future house price movements, interest rates, movements and costs, how long you live, and the amount you borrow or sell. That is the financial side, and the future movements represented by these variables can lead to one option being better in certain scenarios, the alternative option being better in others. As the future movement in house prices and interest rates etc. are unknown, the best option may only become clear with the benefit of hindsight. Any decision between the alternative options requires careful appraisal of your financial position and the aims you have for releasing equity from your property. There are also going to be other factors which will affect your decisions. These include your age and life expectancy, and are there one or two of you to consider? The state of your health, and your wider family position and your legacy wishes, your other financial provisions, and the likelihood of you needing care. Many people considering equity release options will be very concerned about the legacy position and leaving their property to their children or other beneficiaries. They will not want to reduce the equity in the property at the expense of the children's inheritance. With both a lifetime mortgage and a home reversion plan, it is possible to build in some certainty in respect for future finances. With a home reversion plan, you will know the exact percentage of the property sold and what remains owned. This ownership amount is ring-fenced for later use, possibly to leave in a will as an inheritance. With some lifetime mortgages, it may also be possible to ring-fence an element of the equity. There are schemes which have this available. So when is equity release suitable? There are many situations where equity release can be considered as a suitable option. I will cover the most relevant examples in this section. The first is to think of the situation where it can be used to enhance retirement income. The expression asset-rich, cash-poor is relevant in today's marketplace, where thousands of people have insufficient pension provision but have valuable equity in their property. This is an ideal situation to consider equity release, especially schemes which provide income payments, as this will directly allow for retirement income to be enhanced. Take a scenario where a couple in their late 60s have pensions amounting to £15,000 per year, with a property owned outright, valued at £500,000. Their pensions are insufficient, as they have a desired income of £25,000 per year. They are short of their target by £10,000 per year. Based on their current ages, they can release a maximum of £197,500. Planning options include releasing this full amount and putting in place an investment income portfolio, drawing against this sum in stages, or releasing the sum in full and buying a lifetime annuity, a pension income for life, or a mix of any of these could be combined. The second area to consider is when a lump sum is required. This could include situations such as paying off a mortgage, paying off credit cards or loans, making home improvements, one-off purchases such as a car, caravan or holiday, or even helping out friends or family members. The sum raised can provide necessary funds for any of these. That sum is raised free of tax, making it a viable alternative to other options. In some instances, a lump sum will be required immediately, in others it may be in stages. If it's the latter, then this is when a drawdown version of equity release may be more suitable. For example, it may be that a sum of £20,000 is required for some purpose now, but the possibilities of further sums totalling £30,000 might be required over the next few years. If this is the case, then £50,000 could be secured as the agreed amount, but with just £20,000 being drawn on day one, the other remaining amounts could be drawn later as and when required. A third area to consider would be where there are care fees to be paid. This is a little complicated by the fact that should you need to go into residential care, the property would need to be sold under the terms of an equity release scheme. The equity release option is feasible when either you need to pay for care in your own home or a couple own their own home and one of the couple requires care. There is a further consideration for couples to do with local authority assessments, which is a means test to see whether the care fees can be covered by a local authority. If one of the couple remains in the family home, then this reduces the value of the property from being included in any means test assessment. There will be many potential situations where an equity release solution can support the costs of care, which in today's market is becoming a greater concern for many individuals and couples. So who is it suitable for? To be eligible for equity release, you need to be at least 55 years old, own a property and have sufficient equity in the property. The equity is the difference between the value of the property and any outstanding loan or mortgage secured against it. If you have an existing loan or mortgage, this does not preclude you from an equity release solution, as you could use the money raised via the equity release to clear the existing borrowing. The minimum age of 55 normally refers to the youngest age where couples are involved. For example, a 61-year-old and a 48-year-old couple would be precluded. The age 55 is relevant to the option of a lifetime mortgage. For a home reversion plan, the typical minimum age is 65. Individuals or couples who own a property and are requiring additional sums, either a one-off capital amount or to enhance income in their later years, are the perfect candidates to look at equity release as a viable solution. The question of suitability in individual circumstances should always be explored using expert advice from a properly regulated and qualified equity release advisor. Many regulated or qualified financial advisors do not have the specific equity release qualifications or expertise. It's also advisable to engage with family members, especially children in these situations. This is both for common sense family reasons. Your loved ones will want to ensure you are taken care of, but also because the children or other family members may well be the ones you intend to inherit your property, and therefore any scheme entered into could directly affect them. In many cases, family members actively encourage the equity release solution and can be influential in seeing this put into place, as they are more concerned by their parents' well-being ahead of their inheritance. So what type of property can be used? There can be variations from scheme providers, but typical criteria for properties to qualify for an equity release include: the property must have a minimum valuation of £70,000. It should be freehold or leasehold, with a minimum remaining lease period of 75 years. Applicants need to own the property outright, or to be able to pay off any outstanding mortgage from the proceeds of the equity release arrangement. The property should be of standard construction, and the property should be situated in England, Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland. Traditionally, the market restricted equity release to the main residence. However, in recent times, innovations have opened the use of buy-to-let properties, holiday homes and second homes as security for equity release schemes. This increases the options. Now I want to talk about things to look out for. There is a list of factors to think about with the equity release solution, and many aspects to be wary of, and I will now cover a selection of the most important ones. Firstly, are you sure you have covered all the possible alternatives? It's very important to weigh up equity release against other ways, if there are any, of reaching the same objective. It's only when the options are compared against each other that the advantages and disadvantages of equity release become clear. Have relevant family members been consulted? Equity release is an area where getting input, support and backing from wider family is normally desirable. Have you compared a lifetime mortgage to the home reversion option, looking at the pros and cons of each? In respect of the individual schemes, have you considered the different sub-options for each scheme? Have all the costs involved been assessed, and how these costs vary from scheme provider to provider? Is a possible specific equity release solution you are considering covered by safeguards put in place by the Equity Release Council? Have you accessed advice and help from an appropriately qualified advisor? And finally, in respect of any consideration towards equity release, your health will be an important factor. It may be possible to enhance income from an equity release arrangement if you are in ill health, as there are income products which increase the income available in these circumstances. Conversely, your health may dictate your probability of needing residential care outside of your own home, which could affect the viability of an equity release solution. So now let me answer some frequently asked questions. Firstly, how can the money raised from an equity release be used? Well, there are no restrictions on how you use any funds raised. You should take advice before entering into any arrangement, and your advisor should ensure this is a suitable option and there are no better alternatives. Can equity release affect means-tested benefits? Yes. The money raised can inflate your savings amounts, and the levels of savings you have may impact pension credit, saving credit, or council tax benefit, which all have limits applied to how much you can have in total savings before you start to lose your benefits. Can you move property after an equity release has been arranged? Yes, but only to a suitable alternative property. There are some properties which scheme providers would not be able to accept because of their inability to sell the property in an open market. This can include homes in some retirement complexes or property built of a special construction. You should be aware of such restrictions, but generally over and above these you can move property. What about moving into long-term care? Well, this is dependent on the nature of the long-term care and whether you are one of a couple or an individual on your own in terms of the property ownership. Equity release plans generally require your property to be sold and the equity release scheme paid off when you go into long-term care if that care is not provided in your own home. If you go into residential care, this would apply. The property would be sold and the scheme closed. However, if one of the couple remains in the family home, this would not apply. A complication comes from situations where the individual goes into care in another home, say of a relative. Then the position would be dictated by the scheme provider's terms and conditions. It's important to assess the exact wording when agreeing to any arrangement. What regulatory or other protections are there? Equity release providers and advisors will be regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority, or the FCA. You can check with the FCA to make sure any individual or firm is appropriately authorised. The Equity Release Council provides added protection as they require scheme providers to work to minimum agreed standards. For example, schemes will now have a protection that your home cannot be repossessed in your lifetime. If your loan value became higher than the value of your home, the scheme provider cannot take your home from you. Should a will be in place? Yes. A will should be in place regardless of the equity release consideration. However, specifically in respect of the equity release and its impact on your overall position, a will is essential. If you put an equity release arrangement into effect and already have a will, then it's sensible to review the provisions of the will alongside the new scheme. But what about a power of attorney, or POA? Power of attorneys are a subject worthy of a guide all on their own. The principal point is that a POA is a document which an individual creates to give over powers around their financial affairs to another person or persons. These normally come into effect if an individual loses their capacity to deal with their affairs themselves. Sadly, this happens too often in later life. The POA is a practical way of dealing with this situation and can save a great deal of aggravation and in some cases prove financially important. It allows for a trusted individual or individuals to step in and take control of an individual's affairs. Where an equity release scheme is in place, this could be important, especially if the individual must go into care or have care in their home. Such a decision could have a considerable financial implication. There is no legal requirement to have a POA in place, but from a planning viewpoint, it's desirable and should be included. If I already have an equity release plan, can I switch it to another provider? Yes, this is feasible but very much circumstantial. Many older schemes had higher rates of interest than are typically available in today's market. It's worth looking at how this could be changed to reduce costs. Likewise, terms and conditions on newer schemes may be more suitable. I now want to recap the different types of scheme. Firstly, lifetime mortgages. A lifetime mortgage is a type of mortgage which does not require monthly repayments. You retain ownership of your home and interest to the loan is rolled up or compounded. They are normally available from the age of 55. In the case of a couple, this will apply to the younger age. The loan and the rolled up interest are repaid by your estate when you die or move into long-term care. With some plans or schemes, rather than roll up the interest, you can opt to make monthly repayments if you wish. These can be for the full amount of interest or part of it. For couples, repayment of the loan is not made until the last remaining person living in the home either dies or moves into care. If you take out a lifetime mortgage, you can choose to receive your funds in a lump sum or in regular amounts as an income. The payments are tax-free. The lump sum payments can be drawn in stages, known as a drawdown. This means you do not incur interest charges or costs on any undrawn amount. Indeed, you could leave the amounts undrawn forever. With certain schemes and providers, there are options to increase the amount you have borrowed as and when you want. You can elect to protect some of the value of your property as an inheritance for your family. Again, this varies from scheme to scheme and provider to provider. If you have impaired health, you may be able to increase the amounts you can secure through equity release. And now home reversion plans. A home reversion plan allows you to access all or part of the value of your property while retaining the right to remain in your property rent-free for the rest of your life. The minimum age is normally 65. In the case of a couple, this will apply to the younger of the couple. With a home reversion plan, the provider will purchase all or part of the property considering your age or your health and will provide you with a tax-free cash lump sum or regular payments, and a lifetime lease guaranteeing you the right to stay in your property rent-free for the rest of your life. The amount offered is discounted to the current market value to take into account the provider's costs. The discount is calculated on the age and health criteria I've already mentioned. The older you are, the more cash you can release. The percentage you retain in your property will always remain the same, regardless of the change in property values, unless you decide to take further cash releases. A guaranteed percentage of the property will pass to your beneficiaries. You will benefit from the increase in value on your share of the property, but this could work the other way if property prices decrease. You are still responsible for the maintenance of the property and any works involved. At the end of the plan, which is either on death, in the case of a couple the second death, or going into residential care, the property is sold, and the sale proceeds are shared according to the remaining proportions of ownership. Home reversion plans involve no borrowing or lending. It's a sale and purchase agreement with a lifetime lease attached. And finally, I want to talk about getting help. There are certain financial transactions when doing it yourself is a feasible option, whereas there are others where help and advice is important. Organising an equity release solution fits firmly into the second category. There are various factors, from which type of scheme to use, on what basis, how they stack up to other alternatives, costs, terms and conditions, plus how this affects or fits in with your wider financial planning. You may wish to consider your broader family position and how any solution impacts on your beneficiaries. There are many considerations to weigh up and balance out. Using a properly regulated equity release advisor provides a layer of regulatory protection and should ensure you get the most suitable outcome. Thank you for listening. For more information, visit our website at interfacefinancialplanning.co.uk.